All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Popcorn Politics. I'm Dylan Brown, and joining me, as always, is my co host Alex Heller. And today we're going to talk about the Captain America trilogy and how they reflect America's evolving relationship with American exceptionalism and just the idea of America in general. Alex, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So you pitched this to me, and I want to let you lead in with the first movie.
Okay.
Um,
So
yeah.
yeah, I this was like the first time I've seen it in quite a long time. I saw this when I was sick because I wanted to binge watch all the MCU movies for sickly entertainment. So um, premiered in 2011. Steve Rogers is a sickly man from Brooklyn who's transformed into a super soldier, Captain America, to aid the American war effort in World War II. Rogers must stop the Red Skull, Adolf Hitler's ruthless head of weaponry, and leader of an organization that intends to use a mysterious device of untold powers for world domination. So that's pretty much the gist of it. That's like the bare bones of the film. And it's really just, one of those classic popcorn movies that you can just turn off your brain for like half a minute and just get sucked into the world immediately.
Hmm.
I feel like this was one of those. This came out in 2011, and this was considered one of those filler movies right before the first Avengers film. And I think this came out roughly right after or right before Thor. I want to say that came out before Thor.
They both
Um,
came out in 2011.
yes, they both came out.
Um,
I want to say they came out like a couple months before. It doesn't matter. This is seen as more of like the filler episode or the filler movie before the entire big team up.
yeah,
But
honestly, I saw it in 2011.
mm,
Hadn't seen it again until you pitched this to me.
really, you've only seen this once?
Yeah, twice now, but only once before you pitched it to me.
Mm,
I haven't given this movie much thought at all,
mm,
honestly.
hmm.
It's a fine movie.
Yeah, 3 out of 5.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
3 out of 5.
it is
But there's
very
hidden,
fine.
yeah, but there's like hidden, you know, depths and themes within it.
Yeah.
But there's like very minuscule, not as overt as in like the later films that we're going to be talking about, but it's subtle. Um, Particularly how they handle Captain America's character, and pretty much in the entire era that the film takes place in. Um, so, like I
Yeah.
said, the film takes place during World War II, right before the Allied. It just happened right after the Allied invasion of Normandy, whatnot, and but the Allies were still struggling in Europe, in Western Europe, particularly in Italy at the time. France definitely too, but the film itself is not a commentary, but more of a mirror or a window. A window is probably the best description. It's more of a window of what America used to be
And
before,
what
you know.
America certainly what America perceived itself to
Oh
be.
yeah, particularly how America perceived itself to be during World War II, and some of the World War II movies way before Captain America pretty much elevated elevated the entire you know country, the elevated America's importance in World War II. And it was America's involvement in World War II was very important, but very minuscule compared to what the British, the French, and the Soviet Union and China had to deal with during the entire time. We didn't get involved until like almost towards the halfway point of the entire war. Um, and the films that represent our involvement pretty much showcase that yes, we were the only ones, or at least we spearheaded the campaign to end fascism in Europe
We
and
did
take
we did it
down.
the best.
We did it the best way. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like films like Patton, Saving Private Ryan, um, The Longest Day, all those types of films elevate America's importance in the war effort.
And
And
so
to
does this movie.
Oh, in this movie, absolutely. This movie is pretty much exemplary of those same types of movies that elevate or at least enhance America's position in the world during and after World War II.
Eh,
And not for anything, I mean, there's some truth to it, you know. Our
There's
our
yeah, there's
yeah.
truth in every story.
Oh yeah. And America's involvement pretty much, we were called the sleeping giant to the Japanese right after the attack on Pearl Harbor. And as a result, we went on the world stage, and for the past 75 years, we've pretty much controlled, or at least spearheaded, um, the idea of liberty, freedom, and democracy across the world. And this movie pretty much is an example of what we laid down during that time. Because Captain America, well, at least Steve Rogers, before he became Captain America, tried adamantly to volunteer into the war effort. And I think the one thing that I kind of criticize about this film too is that it doesn't really talk about the men and women that in the home front that really tried to keep everything together, or at least functioning in
I
this in the country at the time, in the home front. You know what I mean? Bucky
yeah, I
himself pretty much says, "Hey, there are people over here doing their best and doing what they can for the war effort." And Steve just wants to go over there and say there, and he's his heart's in the right place, saying there are people laying down, there are men laying down their lives for the sake of our freedom, and it'd be a travesty if I didn't go. You know?
yeah, I mean, he I would like to say this was purposeful on
Mhm.
the part of the Marvel universe. I don't think it was, but he really did represent like what every American grows up thinking America is.
Yeah,
Um, the
exactly.
scra- the scrawny underdog that rises and becomes the biggest power in the world.
hmm Yeah, and not only that, since the film came out 10 years after 9/11, there were a lot of men and women volunteering right after the 9/11 attacks, getting volunteering for the Army, Navy, Marines, because they felt
Yeah,
that they were honor bound and duty
I
to actually volunteer their lives for the sake of their protecting their our country and our freedom. And I can't really fault them for doing that, because you know that's what the men and women of America have been doing since this country's been since the founding of this country. You know.
yeah, I was saying to you before we came on, I think it's interesting that this movie came out in a time. This movie that kind of idealizes American foreign policy
Mm,
came out at a time when Americans were still highly skeptical
mm,
of of our foreign policy endeavors, specifically in the Middle East.
mm,
I thought that was interesting, especially since, as we're gonna get to,
yeah.
Winter Soldier and Civil War are much more cynical, I
Yeah.
would say.
And this one, yeah, this one's more cynical, but this one is also, but the Captain America, the First Avenger, is romantic with the
Hmm.
capital R. You know, it exemplifies, what America used to be. America used to be united on a lot of things. Maybe like even during like the height of Vietnam, America was still united on certain things and issues. And by the time the 21st century came along, we were still united, even up until 2011. I was telling you this before we came on. Like in 2011, that was the same year Osama bin Laden was killed by SEAL Team Six. And every American was cheering and united and happy because of what happened. And I remember when I was in like high school when that happened, sophomore. When I was in high school, my mom woke me up and, like around 11 o'clock, 12 a.m. It was on a school night. I was like, "What's going on? Did something happen?" She was like, "Yeah, something happened." She turned on the TV and I saw that Osama bin Laden was taken down, killed, and I was surprised. I was happy that happened. You know what I mean? Like, as an American, I was happy because this man has been terrorizing our country for almost a decade, almost close to a decade, close to a decade by the time he was killed. Um, and you know, and it felt like America was still united in that aspect. And now, you said this was not on purpose at all, and I totally agree. It was just coincidental.
Yeah, I'm skeptical of almost all of the thematic meaning that we're finding in this movie. I It exists whether it was intended or not.
Yeah,
Um,
it was an
but
accidental. It was a happy accident.
yeah, but I don't think it was intended at all. I think
No,
the
no.
filmmakers just wanted to create a Captain America story. They weren't thinking about how it reflects society at all.
Well, no.
I do think the other two movies thought of that though.
Yeah, but I think the first one, well, when you deal with somebody like Captain America, even World War II in general, when you deal with a subject like that, you deal with themes of war, patriotism, and fighting for liberty automatically, no matter how like overt or subtle they are. You know what I mean? I mean, this one is a little bit more subtle. You know me, I find small stuff like here and there. It's like, oh, did they do that on purpose? Oh, no, it was a happy accident. Oh, it was coincidental. You know what I mean? But if you think about it in the larger scope, in the past, like say 10 years between 2011 and 2022, 2021, to the early 2020s, it's interesting how the three films pretty much reflected how America exceptionalism pretty much not digress but evolved over time, and I feel like this film accidentally represented how united America was, and how a lot of Americans at the time, even though they were very skeptical about the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, they were very exhausted by it. By the time Osama bin Laden was killed, we were still relatively united on a lot of issues, particularly foreign policy. Not so much domestic, but we were, agreeing to disagree by that time. And I feel like somewhat, somewhat. It wasn't as crazy as it was by like almost 6 years later, but
No, certainly.
like I
Um,
feel like this film accidentally showcased what America used to be and how America was kind of united in certain aspects in life. You know what I mean?
yeah. So, how do you think Winter Soldier specifically? Um, what do you think happened there? What changed? What was that movie getting at? Because it wasn't the end point that Civil War was.
No. I think. Oh, so we're moving on to Winter Soldier then?
Unless you have more you want to say about First Avenger, but I feel like we were kind of spinning our wheels there.
Yeah, at this point, yeah, because how basic can you get with a World War II movie?
Yeah,
Like I
I
said
mean,
before, it deal no matter what World War II movie, when you're dealing with American characters, American soldiers, you're dealing with the same sort of three themes: uh, honor, protecting liberty around the world,
and
and
you're not doing it particularly well. Like you're doing it fine, but not better than we've seen in any other war movie.
no, yeah, exactly. I have a friend of mine who absolutely loves this film. Like I love it. She loves it. I'm like, really? It's
uh,
it's okay. I don't want to go out of my way to watch it and rewatch it. You know what I mean?
hey, I'm happy. I'm happy this movie has a fan,
I
but
yeah, a fan, one fan. I mean, yeah, it's like I said,
it's
it's like one of
fine.
those movies where you turn on, you just turn off your brain, and the themes are there. It's interesting. It's interesting to explore in the larger context, but as a film by itself, it's just like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, that
But
happened.
it's not as crazy as what's it called? The Winter Soldier is though.
Or as technically impressive as Winter Soldier is.
Yeah, 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 yeah. The Winter Soldier is kind of crazy. So, do you want to explain what the Winter Soldier is doing?
Yeah, so Winter Soldier, I actually hadn't seen this in probably 6 years. It's been before we agreed to watch this. I don't do a lot of MCU binges. It
Hmm.
doesn't happen often.
Mm.
Um, but Winter Soldier, the basic story, there's some shenanigans going on within Shield. Um,
Shenanigans.
yes, Hydra is back. Surprise, surprise. Um, and they have sort of taken over the intelligence apparatus. You could call it the deep state. I think that would be a fair
Mm.
assessment of what
Mm-hmm.
Shield was. And the movie, from where I'm sitting at least, reflects a Steve Rogers that is disillusioned
Mm-hmm.
with intelligence and with America, but he hasn't abandoned it yet.
Mm-hmm.
He certainly hasn't abandoned
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. What do you get from this movie?
Well, this movie came out 2014, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so America at the time was getting leaks, intelligence leaks left and right almost every day.
Was 2014 the same year as the torture reports? As the CIA torture report?
I'm not entirely sure. They may have come out before or relatively just before
I'm gonna
um,
look that up.
2014. But even if they came out long before or long after this film came out, um, Edward Snowden leaked the entire NSA apparatus of how exactly entrenched, you know, surveillance is into American society. Even a little bit after that, you had more intelligence leaks
So,
from what did you find it?
so 2014, the report didn't come out, but the CIA had been accused of uh, accessing the intelligence community's computers
Mm?
and doing some shady shit, basically.
Yeah, yeah. That's like another happy accident in how, it
Yeah,
reflects the film itself. But before the film came out, you had individuals like Bradley Manning, um,
yeah, Chelsea
Chelsea Manning,
Manning,
excuse me.
Chelsea Manning,
Chelsea Manning. You had individuals like Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden,
Julian
Julian
Assange.
Assange. Yeah, he's in the film. Julian Assange is in the film. The quick flash of
Oh, on the TVs.
yeah, on the big TV showcasing all the craziness, you see Julian Assange is in that film. So this came out like relatively before all the intelligence leaks left and right, um, and how entrenched the NSA was into our computers. They were spying on us. They were spying on American citizens.
Hmm.
The meme where the FBI is spying on me. What's up, FBI? How you doing? How's your Saturday going? That's where that meme started. That's where that joke came from. And by the way, it's not the FBI, it's the NSA. The NSA is spying on you. So like the film came out a little bit after all that, and um, also the rise of ISIS came out, started coming up in, I want to say, around the same year, and then our involvement into Iraq began again, just to counteract um, the rise of ISIS, and
Which
then
was met with increased skepticism,
well,
much
yeah,
like the
exactly.
film.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
what I think this reflects, personally, the first movie reflects what Americans believe America is. The second movie is what America wants, or what Americans want America to be. And you see it throughout the movie, Steve Rogers fighting for his ideal of America.
Yeah,
That's what this movie is. There's still a hint of optimism in this
a
movie.
little bit, yeah, but I feel like the film has a sort of unhappy ending. You know,
I would agree.
um, the biggest twist, spoiler alert, is that Hydra grew out of Shield. It was a parasite from,
Operation Paperclip.
yes, Operation Paperclip. But what was the character's name? I think his name was Zola, right? Armin Zola. Yes, it was Armin
Yes.
Zola. He became a United States citizen after World War II, so that the Soviets couldn't get any more German scientists, and that was Operation Paperclip. That was a big. That was a big. Um, uh, you know, Counterintelligence foreign policy operation that the United States had to actually try to one up the Soviet Union during the atomic age, the space race, and the arms race within the Cold War. That was a real thing. And the way that they used Operation Paperclip within that film was actually kind of brilliant because it made the most sense as to why, Armanzola survived, or at least why Shield had to pick up all these German scientists, all these Nazi scientists. Um, and it pretty much, like, I think that's one of the major conspiracy theories, or at least one of the biggest conspiracy theories, or birth of conspiracy theories in America right now.
Yeah,
Um,
2013, 2014 was a real explosion uh,
yeah,
in that.
exactly. Yeah, and the film itself kind of, reflects that, especially with Operation Paperclip. But the thing of it is too, um,
Do you know how many people I know who don't even realize Operation Paperclip was real?
yeah, yeah, no,
We
I think
actually did that.
that's a scary thing. Like, the scariest thing, that the United States hated communists so much that they, you know, uh, asked
Granted
Nazis.
amnesty to Nazis
Yeah,
and gave
and
them
not only that.
access to classified
Hmm.
materials. And
hmm And not only that, they ignored all the war atrocities that Japan did in China, and even to some of our own soldiers, just so that they would be united during the Cold War. I mean, on a macroeconomic foreign policy, um, I kind of get it, but it's kind of messed up that we had to do it just so that we could one up communists. And I'm just and Russia in itself has been a paper tiger since the Crimean War, ever since then. But that's neither here nor there.
I
We
do think it's interesting
Yeah.
that the first Avenger is all about fighting Nazis, and then
hmm
then Rogers realizes, oh no, the Nazis are in the government now.
hmm hmm Or not even the Nazis, the fascists, because that's what they are.
Well,
You
of
know,
course, they're the
the
same.
fascists
Nazi
are
fascist.
in the fascists are in the government, and the deep. I wouldn't call what's it called, Shield, the deep state. I think the Hydra is more of a deep state than Shield.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, or at
Uh,
least that's what
although
the idea
Nick,
of it.
although Nick Fury was developing helicarriers that could catch people and assassinate them preemptively. So
Yeah, and that goes on to our next point in that film, is that it deals with the same themes with Minority Report, into stopping things before they even happen,
you know,
stopping crimes and terrorist acts before they even happen.
I know we're not talking about it. I just watched Minority Report for the first time like last week.
Weird. It's a weird movie, right?
Fantastic movie.
Yeah, I think that's his. I know we're going off on a tangent, but that's like Steven Spielberg's last great blockbuster, in my opinion.
Oh, I don't know if I'd agree with that, but it's fantastic.
Yeah, but those, like, are the same themes that Captain America deals with: stopping terrorist acts and crimes before they happen, and then just deals with the idea of whether or not you're, attacking free will as it is, or you're just attacking, or at least going after, individuals who may or may not even pose a threat, and you're finding arbitrary threats just so that you look powerful, as a means just to calm everything down, calm everyone down. Um,
Yeah, I think you could almost take the whole helicarrier thing and make it a reflection on uh, Guantanamo Bay and terrorism.
mm,
You could almost make the argument that that movie was asking, should we really give unaccountable intelligence agencies all this power?
yeah, but the thing of it is too, is that you know, the whole aspect with Shield taking away, or at least grow, like Hydra Shield. I'm gonna say Hydra Shield for the sake of our conversation.
Perfect.
Um, for Hydra Shield to grow as it did, I think Armanzola explained it, that if you forcefully take people's freedom, or you go after them overtly, people will rebel. They will make sure that they have their freedom and they will fight for it. But the almost ingenious way that this film explains is that if if you cause many crises to the point where people are so panicked or so scared that they're willing to give away their freedom for the sake of their own security, you've won, you know. And the more crises and the more it happens, the more, or at least the more likely a citizenry is likely to actually, give up even more and more for the sake of their own security. And that's not even like that didn't even like happen all that much in 2014, but it did happen throughout, the post 9/11 era, and even to a certain extent during COVID. You
But
know,
people weren't thinking about it then, which is why I think it
but
which is
that's the
why I think
scariest thing about that movie.
yeah,
People weren't thinking about that. You
no,
know,
and no, and that's why it came up in this movie instead, I think, of the first Avenger, because we had to have look, I don't think it was intentional, but I think it worked out perfectly that you do need to have one movie about romanticism. You need the romantic vision presented so that you can pull back the curtain.
yeah. And this movie pulls back the curtain of American exceptionalism, or at least, how America is viewed both around the world and within our country at home. But there's small things within this film that kind of makes it even a little bit more perfect. Robert Redford's in this movie. Now, if you
God
don't,
bless the
yeah,
Robert Redford.
yeah, and if
Also,
you
just watched All the President's Men for the first time last
exactly,
week.
like, come on. And if there's a certain scene in that film, in Winter Soldier, where Robert Redford is looking over the window, the Watergate Hotel is right across from there.
I know.
Okay.
It was perfect.
Not even that. Like, it's perfect for him. It's perfect for like
And
illustrating the connection with Robert Redford as an actor. But it also connects. It's a political scandal film if you think about it.
and and the end of All the President's Men has a scene with the uh source in the bureau, Deep Throat, where he's talking about how it's every intelligence agency. It's the
Yeah,
whole thing.
it's the whole thing. It's the whole thing. And the same thing
It's the
happened with
whole thing.
Shield. The
Yeah.
same thing happened with Shield in this film. And if like the film itself is also political espionage, but it's a political crisis film. You know,
Now, okay, this is this is definitely a stretch and it was not intentional at all. But I do like that Robert Redford, the person keeping the country accountable in All the President's Men, in this movie is reflected as an old bureaucrat who's now propping up a new system.
yeah, baby
It,
boomer.
that was not intentional, but I love it.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
nice touch.
yep. He's the same. He's from the same generation that criticized, attacked, and even you know continued to
The
question.
the people who protested Vietnam but supported her.
Yeah, not even just Vietnam, the government itself. I remember watching the Ken Burns's Vietnam documentary, and one of the soldiers, or at least the people he was interviewing, one of the American soldiers, he said, we were the last generation that trusted our government, and for the most part, baby boomers are, and as soon as they came into power, they ended up doing the same thing that um that their parents and grandparents did when they were in power, but to an extent that was just so crippling to the next generation. And
Yeah,
like you said, that's a bit of a stretch, but
but it's a nice touch.
it's a nice touch. Yeah, it's funny how it's the same generation that said uh, peace, love, fuck the government, ended up saying, uh, law and order, and getting more and more conservative. And that tends to happen no matter what generation it is. Like,
Oh,
as soon
oh no, Watergate's terrible. Hold on, I need to go build a helicarrier to predict future crimes.
exactly, but the thing of it is too, the reason why they built all those helicarriers was not only like if we take, the first Iron Man film as like a standing point, that means 9/11 actually happened in the MCU.
Oh
And
yeah.
and this film came out 2 years after the first Avengers film. So they know that there's aliens out there more powerful and willing to destroy the entire Earth. So it's not just terrorists that um, or Earth and even America have to like worry about. It's aliens now. It's gods. It's giant titans willing to find all these magic stones to kill half of the universe. You know. So you
But
have
we're
to.
still busy predicting future crimes of the guy on the corner.
But can you blame that mentality? Like, Amenzola said that like even if Hydra continued to perpetrate and cause all these political crises on Earth to the point where we would let go or at least decide to get rid of our freedom, our autonomy, and self-reliance, it's not just that, but the external factors that affected that world. It's the external factors of all these big ass aliens coming in and killing people left and right out of
Well,
nowhere.
I
I,
don't agree that that's part of it. I
oh, I,
don't.
I think in the film universe that's part of it, but not in real world context. You know, um, if we just take the movie as it is in that universe, in at that point in time in that universe, that's the reason why they built all those helicarriers. Because I think the reason why they built all those helicarriers is just so that they can diverse their attention from international terrorism and other countries and worry about more what's happening or what's going to happen in in space when the big end game, quote unquote, happens. So I
Mhm.
feel like that was like story wise, that makes the most sense in that world, in that universe. But it also works in the context as to why, in our real world, why that would happen. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
and and it's interesting too that, like you said, Captain America pretty much sticks to his
Who he
idea
is.
of America still trying to at least be a focal point or a city on a hill for freedom and democracy and liberty. And we have to we have to at least combat these aggressors, both foreign and domestic. You know what I mean. No matter where it happens, we need to fight it. And I feel like you illustrated at this point that he still sticks to his ideas in America, trying to do its best, but he realizes that America's not really doing that well in terms of fighting this encroachment of freedom, fear, and endless uh,
But
crises.
what I will say is his final speech in the film reflects that he still, even at the end, even after everything he's seen, has
Hmm.
a belief that the American people
Yes.
want his ideal of America.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we see in Civil War, he no longer holds that belief.
No, no, not anymore. By then, absolutely not. So by like 2014, like what we illustrated, like early on, like America itself was not really, unified in a lot of aspects. We were kind of, you know, still unified in certain ideas, but as social media, as we got more and more into our like own social bubbles on social media, and the more polarized our culture got, I feel like it was only a matter of time before individuals like Donald Trump, or at least, on the far right or the far left, were going to happen. You know what I mean? Like with either with Bernie Sanders or with Donald Trump. That's I feel like by like 2016 was an inevitable. You know,
Oh,
2015.
certainly.
I feel like between 2014, between this movie and 2016 and Civil War, America was slowly degrading philosophically and getting more and more. Um, heated, if that's the right phrase, on
Yeah,
almost
the
every subject.
tension was racketing up.
Yeah, and it
Um,
didn't really help that, the themes and ideas explored in Winter Soldier continued to
Play out.
perpetuate this divisive illness that continued in 2016. You know,
Well,
and
and I think by the time while I do think First Avenger was a happy accident, and I do largely think that Winter Soldier was a happy accident as far
mhm,
as timing. I think 2016 was deliberate. I think Civil War
yeah,
was deliberate.
mhm,
I think Civil War was the writer's attempt not at predicting the future, but at diagnosing the future,
I
and they
kind of
just happened to
disagree.
get right there.
I mean, I disagree on that. I think Winter Soldier was more intentional.
It was more intentional, but,
In
like,
terms
they
of
couldn't
timing, I think 2016. I think Civil War was an accident, a happy accident.
I think so okay, let me let me clarify.
Mm,
Civil War was a happy accident as far as the timing,
mm,
uh, as was Winter Soldier. I
mm,
don't I think Winter Soldier was more deliberate in terms of its themes. I don't
mm,
think its themes were a happy accident necessarily.
mhm.
I think that Civil War was an attempt at showing a possible future, except it happened at the same time as
Yeah,
reality.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think they got the events right, but the timing wrong.
Okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. But yeah, Civil War. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, I mean, you can make the case that it was deliberate. Yeah, you can definitely see that. Especially, it came out in April, right? And that was
Yeah,
after most of the primaries ended. Correct?
yeah, and it was after. I mean, Trump had announced in what, February of 2015.
Yeah.
So the movie was still, I think, being filmed at that point.
Hmm.
So, like, and we know how Marvel movies are with script revisions. So I can't imagine that they didn't have an idea what they were doing.
Yeah. 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 Well,
But
yeah. This film
we've
came
got
out
a,
in late April.
we've got about 15, 20 minutes left. Do we want to move to Civil War?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's about time. I think that's
All right.
probably going to take up most of the time.
So lead us into Civil War. What do you got?
Okay. So after the events of the second Avengers film, Age of Ultron, the Sokovia Accords are being presented at the United Nations to curtail the involvement of Earth's mightiest heroes, the Avengers, after the complete, almost utter complete destruction of the small country of Eastern Europe, Sokovia. Um, so there is a philosophical debate on whether or not the Avengers should or should not intervene unilaterally um, when the world is in trouble, regardless of what happens. And a philosophical debate happens between Iron Man, Tony Stark, who wants to be kept in check, who understands that the issues being presented are mostly of their own volition. They cause it, so they have to end it, and they need to be kept in check. And with Captain America, Steve Rogers understands that we're doing our best here, and the best is that we may not, we may be causing some of the issues, but some of it happens, without our involvement whatsoever, and
Can
we have
I?
no. What's up?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
And yeah, and we have to at least try to do what we can, regardless if there's, not collateral damage. I shouldn't say that. Regardless if people hate it, whether or not people hate it that we're there, you know. So that's the
Yeah,
main issue. In the background, you have the villain Armin Zemo looking
Helmet
to,
Zemo.
yeah, looking to discredit and further tear apart the Avengers, and as a result, you see conflict not only philosophically between Captain America and Iron Man, while also a villain looking to exacerbate the issue as a whole,
So,
secretly
okay.
behind closed doors.
So, a couple observations here. First of all, this is a very good movie. I also hadn't seen this since it first came out, I think,
Hmm.
or since like 2018.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it's really interesting. There are 2 points. One, I don't think Zemo needed to be in the movie. I love Zemo. I think he's great. He
Hmm.
didn't need to be here. This movie could have worked fine if it was just the philosophical divide,
Hmm.
but I appreciate his role. Second, I think it's really interesting, and I don't know if this is a commentary or not, how Captain America's disillusionment with the government ends up creating a situation where he disagrees with a position that is intensely American in practice.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think there's really an argument to be made that uh, the position taken by Tony Stark that the Avengers need to be reined in is the one that the Constitution would support.
Hmm.
Uh, the idea, basically, the Avengers are the equivalent of a nuclear first strike.
Yeah.
Captain America is essentially advocating for the authorization for use of military force.
Mm.
Basically,
Mm.
he's advocating for the executive to have full discretion. He's advocating for himself to have full discretion, whereas Tony Stark wants more accountability. I think it's pretty clear which one the American Constitution would support, and I think it's interesting that Steve Rogers has become so disillusioned that he's been put at odds with that.
Okay. So I don't think he's been disillusioned from the Constitution. I think he's disillusioned from the United States government or even just governments in general. Um, but the interesting thing is, I just remembered that most of the characters in when they fight on the airport scene. So the the Tony Stark wants to rein the Avengers in. He wants to make sure that everything is controlled, or at least, uh, he wants a suit of armor around the world. You know,
That's
and
from Age of Ultron, I
Age of
think. Yeah,
Ultron. He's the cause of it. He's the cause of it.
I love Age of
Tony
Ultron.
Stark is the cause of pretty much everything here. He's and if there's anybody to blame for the destruction of Sokovia, it's not the Avengers, or at least they try to mitigate that issue. Tony Stark is the asshole who deserved. He's a war criminal. He's borderline a war criminal because he's created an artificial intelligence that said, "Oh yeah, humans suck, so boom, gotta restart everything." He's like he made Thanos. He essentially made robot Thanos, and he gets off scot free. Him and Bruce Banner, because Bruce Banner was off in like a different planet, but the main arbiter and cause of it. He did it twice. He did it twice in the film in Age of Ultron. He created Vision, a walking nuclear weapon. Okay,
Yeah, but
so he
Vision's
want
amazing. So
Vision is cool, yeah, but okay, so he wants to be kept in check, but he's the only one checking to make sure that everyone's in check. you know so okay, so we have in like the airport scene a division between the Avengers. So on Captain America's side you have Falcon, Winter Soldier, Scarlet Witch, Scott Lang, and there's another one.
uh, um, I actually don't think there
Oh,
is.
I know, don't tell me. It's Hawkeye. So Hawkeye 5.
No, no, yes,
Yeah,
Hawkeye, you're right.
yeah, Hawkeye. And in Tony's team, and on Team Iron Man you have Tony Stark,
Vision.
Rhodey, Vision, Spider-Man. Uh,
Spider-Man's just kind of brought in. I wouldn't even include him.
okay, I'll
Yeah.
just say Spider-Man. Spider-Man, Black Widow, and the richest guy ever, T'Challa, Black Panther. Okay,
T'Challa's only there to go after Bucky.
exactly. But you have on one side a clear division of class itself. You know, I see that it's also a film about class division in itself because Tony Stark is one of the richest individuals on the face of the planet. You have Vision. Oh, Vision. Yeah, Vision, one of the most powerful individuals on the face of the universe. And you have T'Challa, the king of one of the richest, if not the richest, individual in the world. And you have individuals like Steve Rogers, who grew up poor, Bucky Barnes, who grew up poor, Scott Lang, who was a thief, Wanda, who was, just an average citizen in Sokovia, and Hawkeye, who pretty much, I didn't know if whether or not he was poor before he came
I mean,
into,
he owns a farm.
but he owns a farm. He owns a farm. He's a rural individual. So you have this like I'm just remembering this now, but like you have this subtle like class division or class warfare in and in itself because you have one side who have like one of the most powerful and richest like groups or individuals on the face of the planet fighting against some of the most poor individuals, you
Mm,
know, out there. I know it's a bit of a stretch. I hear you're
yeah,
breathing,
I think that one's a stretch.
but it is
But
if you think about it,
to
like
buttress your point, I mean, you could look at the um not buttress to support your point. You could look at the divide as a libertarian versus big government divide,
yeah,
and if you look at it that way, the class division makes more sense.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a stretch out there, but if you think about it, it's like, oh, okay. It's like one of those that's like, oh, I didn't think about that because that's what those teams are. Like the individuals that want to keep in check Captain America are rich and powerful,
Well, I also think it's funny how unbalanced those sides are.
right? Yeah, I think the
Vision,
only
a
yeah,
god.
yeah, God.
Spider-Man is Spider-Man, basically a god. Super strength, super agility.
hmm
Black Panther, also basically a god.
Yeah, richest man in the world, the
Um,
richest man.
two sol- two super soldier, or two highly skilled soldiers with tons of experience, and Iron Man. That's a little unfair.
Yeah, it is. But that's like if you think about it, like I see it as a little bit of a class warfare film, but not to the extent where it carries throughout the entire
So,
movie. Like
so
only that part.
looking at it through that lens, where does Zemo fit in?
Oh, he's Russia. He's Russia.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, that's fair. I mean, that's pretty easy. He's Russian.
No, well, he's Eastern
Sir,
European in the films,
I
but
thought he, I thought he was overtly Russian.
I don't remember. I never read the comics, but I know in the MCU his country's in Eastern Europe, Eastern Europe, excuse me,
I'm gonna
Eastern
look
Europe.
that up.
But yeah, he causes
No,
the division in behind the scenes. He's the main
so
issue of the
he's Sokovian,
Sokovian. Yeah, and that
but he's a member of Sokovian special forces. Um, very clear, like Russian analog. Yeah,
yeah,
I would agree with you.
yeah. He's I don't think he overtly exemplifies Russia, but if you make the parallels between Russia getting involved in the 2016 election and then causing more division over here. I mean, Zemo did the same thing. He did the same thing to the Avengers. He did the same thing to Tony Stark and Captain America. Um, like I think he said it himself when he was speaking to Black Panther towards the end of the film. If you, it's hard to defeat a nation or a group when they're united, but if you attack them on the inside and have
Let
them
me
go
see if I
after each other, it's you'll end an empire then and there.
An empire toppled by its enemies can rise again, but one which crumbles from within, that's dead
Yes,
forever.
that's what he said.
Yeah.
Exactly. Did you look up the quote?
I did look up the
Thank
quote.
you. Thank you. I don't remember exactly what he said, but that's like the gist of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the
Um,
exact quote.
thank God. Thank God for you. Um, yeah, but that's what he says. Like, come on, man. Like, and this came out in April. This came out in April and and the film came out all the way up until like the end of June. I don't know if like it came out again during that summer too, but like this came out way before all of this craziness started in 2016, or at least um, that we know of. That we know of. But you can't tell me that at least 26, at least like the division and how Russia capitalized on that.
It was released May 6th, 2016 in America.
May 6th. So right at like this that happened just before the end of the primaries of the Republican and Democratic primaries. So
Well, I mean, that was a happy accident.
that was a happy accident. But America was definitely divided.
Yes.
America felt it, and we saw it on screen, and we saw what was going to happen. You know,
So somebody just made a comment about separation of powers, and how there was no system to reign in the Avengers. Yes, no, absolutely. I was speaking more as an analog to the authorization for use of military force,
yeah,
um, and how the consistent position that you would think Captain America would support would be more government accountability, but it wasn't.
yeah,
Um,
and no.
but I acknowledge that that is a not a perfect comparison.
Let me ask you this: who did you side with in
I don't
Civil War?
I don't remember. I was going through sort of a political transformation at that
Hmm.
point,
Well, okay. A better question is,
philosophically.
who do you support now? Who would you side with now in that film?
Philosophically, Tony Stark was correct. Practically, I don't know if there was a proper system in place. I don't know what it would have looked like, but not allowing superheroes to run around deciding what to do, um, uh, with no accountability. Yeah, that's definitely the correct position. You don't you wouldn't let citizens own nukes. You
Mm,
wouldn't let people like Thor and Hulk run around deciding what they think is right and acting on it.
mm, mm. Uh, I I sided with Captain America on that issue,
And
only
that's
because
fair. I probably did back then too.
only because in the long term, Captain America was right.
He was right in
Yeah,
the long term of the MCU,
yeah,
but that is a crafted story, not a philosophy. That
yeah.
I think those are different. I think philosophically Iron Man was correct.
I
Ultimately, the story bore Captain America out, to be
Yeah,
fair.
I think. Well, the issue for me is that the person like Tony Stark, I only sided with Captain America for like a couple issues, but the primary issue for me is that I don't want someone like Tony Stark, who makes friends with the rich and powerful, telling others to be kept in check, who himself is causing the issues, the problems,
But
when
I
he's the
think
one causing the problems.
but he was wanting to be kept in check himself.
Doesn't matter. He'd break those checks and balances regardless. He's rich, he's powerful, he owns a fucking metal suit that can go into space, you
He
know.
probably would break those rules, yeah.
He would break
I
those
would not
rules.
disagree with that.
You kidding me? Like,
Yeah,
and his group, like I said before, his group in the airport scene, he had a
but
big fucking cyborg god with him and the
but
richest individual in the MCU in that world. And who else was it? He had Spider Man, so he was cool with the kids. So like, all right, I don't want somebody like him telling me what to do when he's pretty much the cause of it.
but
Why should I listen to him?
at the same time, WandaVision.
Oh, okay, we're okay. Okay, if we're going about that, then sure. Okay. But no, like I sided with Captain America only because largely, even in that world, if we take that, like, only talk about that world for that context, Tony Stark is the issue. He's the he's the main problem of that world. And not only that, he's the first person that saw the vision of Thanos invading Earth and took it to an extreme, to the point where he would much rather control everything so that no one would get hurt. And he says that in the movie. He says that. He says that to Wanda. It's like, you put me in a prison. It's like, no, I put you in your room where you had places to run it around, but you can't leave the country or that compound. I'm like, bro, come on. That's a
Yeah.
slippery slope. That's
Oh,
a slippery slope for
sure, it
him,
is a slippery slope.
you know. And I feel like
We're not we're
Captain
not going
America
down
isn't
the
right
slope yet.
in that aspect, because okay, sure, we need to be kept in check, but who's checking the people who are checking us? You know,
More people
more people and more bureaucracy, to the point where we can't even get anything done. And
or
that's what
voters.
happens. Yeah, and that's what happens in the MCU as a whole. Um, they want the UN and United States government wanted to arrest Captain America when Thanos invaded. You know, what would happen in a real world situation here if America, or at least our allies, needed to go Ukraine?
Well,
If we needed to go over there, what's stopping us? Well, the issue
nothing's
is
stopping us because
nothing is
we've
stopping
given the
us.
president the authorization for use of military force. Maybe
Exactly.
something should be stopping us.
It- you're right and you're wrong, but yeah, exactly.
Something
I'm
probably
not
should
saying
be.
that connects that aspect, but philosophically, Captain America realizes. I think he has. Again, I think that whole idea of being that whole romantic idea of trying to save everyone as best as they can and doing the best job that they can while doing it. I agree with you 100%. I feel like that is also a slippery slope in terms of, interventionism when we don't need to be involved, you know.
Yeah, when you make things worse. I mean, it, the the incident with Wanda blowing up the building, I mean, you could say that's just America's entire escapade in the Middle East. Uh,
Uh, okay, I counter that with Tony Stark literally building a murderous AI robot, and then like a couple years before, and then
uh-huh,
right after goes to MIT
uh-huh.
on the
Kulak. I
and
mean,
performing and not
that's
being held accountable for what he did.
oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah, he should have been held accountable.
Yeah,
You don't have a philosophical gotcha here. I agree with you.
exactly. I
He
mean,
should have been
he
held
should be tried for
accountable.
war crimes, man.
They all probably should be,
Yeah,
honestly. If
exactly. But
but
like
that's
I
the
said,
thing. Like the position is accountability, and
mm, hmm
I think it's interesting.
hmm yeah,
I would argue anti-American ideal position that
hmm
there should be people who are not held to account.
hmm
And that is the position he's arguing for. He's arguing that he shouldn't be held to account for for mistakes that he makes.
who Captain America?
Yeah, for
Yeah,
mistakes that he and his people make.
hmm
And I understand his position. I also think that's definitely against the American ideal that he would have supported in the first two films.
hmm yeah. But like we said before, his idea or American ideals are getting slowly washed away as the
Hmm.
story progresses in that trilogy. And as a
Yeah,
result, I think America itself kind of felt the same way that Captain America was feeling all throughout those that decade of those films coming out. Because by the time Infinity War came out, like, or what was it, Infinity War? Yeah,
yeah,
when he returns, Infinity
as the
War
nomad.
and
Yeah,
yeah, he looked like a nomad. He looked like he was in. He looked like he was just got out of COVID quarantine with all that beard and hair and whatnot. So it's just I feel like he felt exhausted with just everything and everyone, and I feel like America, or at least the American people, were in our culture, kind of felt exhausted with the whole nonsense that's been happening for the past decade.
yeah.
Um,
Well, so we only have a minute left. We spent our whole hour. Do you have? Sorry to cut you off, but do you have any final thoughts here?
Yeah, Tony Stark should have been tried for war crimes. It was
Yes.
all his fault. He's the
Yes.
main reason.
Yes.
Fuck Tony Stark. Go Captain America.
They should all be held accountable. Yes.
Uh,
I I think this is I think it's an interesting trilogy. I wouldn't have looked at the first movie the way I did had you not mentioned it. I wouldn't have looked at the first movie again at all had you
yeah.
not mentioned it.
Mhm. So did you what did you think about that when I talked about that whole
I
thing?
thought it I mean, I thought it when you pitched it to me, I honestly went, "The first movie? Okay." But watching it with that eye does not make the movie any better.
No, it does not.
I
No, it does
still
not.
don't think it's I still don't think it's a very good movie, but it has an interesting point
Mm,
in the context of the rest of the trilogy.
yeah.
Um, and watching the second movie after watching All the President's Men,
Oh
very
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was sick, when I was watching the second movie, I just realized it was that Julian Assange just came out in those flash montage right there, and I was like, oh my god.
And yeah,
That freaked me out when I saw that. That was probably the biggest twist in the past decade, in my opinion.
which
Of
one?
the biggest twist that Shield was Hydra the whole time.
Oh, I don't know. I think within the context of the movie, it was almost inevitable.
No, I was shocked when that happened because Shield was pretty much the person that like, or at least the group that united the Avengers. You know, Coulson represented Shield. You know,
Yeah,
and seeing that Shield was the bad guys the entire time, that was a big twist for me
yeah,
when I first saw it.
and then Civil War. I
Yeah,
don't like that movie as much as most people. It's a good movie though,
yeah,
and I think that these movies were all, or the last two at least, were very timely in a
mm,
way that was not intentional,
mm,
but worked out really well.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So I will tweet out. I know I didn't this time. I promise I will next time. The movies for next week. I figured these were pretty ubiquitous. Most people have seen them, so
Yep.
I didn't feel the need to. But I will make sure to tweet out from Elections Daily what the movies for next week are going to be. Alex, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. This was a fun one.
It was. We'll be back next week, maybe at a different time. We will let you know. Um, yeah, thank you for listening. Stay tuned for Elections Weekly next on Friday with me, Eric Cunningham, maybe some others, and have a good one. We'll see you.